Hey guys, it's Hayes with CheatSheetPros, and I'm going to go back and look at the NBA bet tab for December 29th. Today's December 30th, 2021. I just kind of want to show some people like what I'm looking at and how things turned out. So there's a lot of tutorials, but a lot of things change because it's constantly moving. So let's go ahead and get started. We had a good chunk of games last night, so we got a few we can run through. So Dallas and Sacramento. So I'm looking at this. The Dallas spread was -1.5, -2, somewhere in there. First thing I do is I look at this average line, and we've got Dallas -8, and then I come down here to our Cheat 2 box, and I'm looking at this 70-30 line. This is kind of what I'm following right now, and so we've got Dallas -10. So I'm looking at -8, -10. So that's basically saying, hey, we think Dallas, as long as everybody's in and there's no significant injuries, they're going to win between 8 and 10 points. And then the total, I'm looking right about here for an average of 220. We got our total checker box over here so we can kind of look. I always look at this middle range. So this kind of has a low, a high, middle. Middle's kind of what I compared to. And then the two teams combined and allowed points per game last three. I put those in there, and then our roto pace. So you can see right here, we're all over this 220 number. So we've got 220, 222, quite a bit of a gap in there. So anyways, we think Dallas would win by 8 to 10, so we wrote that up as one of our plays. And then you can see over here, they end up losing by 1. They were actually up 2, and Sacramento hit a 3 at the buzzer for a loss, so that was one of our losses. We were 4-2 in the NBA yesterday and 3-0 in college football. So let's go take a look at the next game. So Miami, that one got canceled. Memphis Lakers. So looking at this line, Memphis -5.5. So our average line, and the quick overview is look at the average line. So we've got Memphis -10, and then look at this 70-30 line down here. We have Memphis -11. So we think they're going to win by 10 to 11 points. That's a good ballpark. And then what was the final on this? So Memphis ended up winning. So they did not cover. We didn't write it up as a play, but they were -5.5 on the last line that I had, and they ended up winning by 5. So it was close. It was right on that cusp, but Memphis is where we would have leaned. As far as totals, everything here was pointing over. We had 212. Our middle that we look at is 221. That was under, so that's kind of a red flag, but this is kind of our range of 216 to 227. So we had a lot of it leaning under. I guess the majority of it would be, if you look at here, 73% of the time going under. But down here on the last three, if you're just looking at those games, we had it going way over. So it's kind of a split decision. And then always look and kind of see what the ATS is, over, under, and home road. That's always good. So we didn't have a play on that, but that's one thing to look at, and it ended up going way under. And then Utah, Portland. Utah was one of our plays. -7.5 is where we betted. I like looking at the last 10 records. So we got 8-2 versus 2-8. So I always check the injuries just to make sure there's not something that I'm missing or a key player that's out. But our average line here, we have Utah -12. And then down here, we have Utah -15. So we think they would win anywhere from 12 to 15 points. And they did. They won by 15 exactly. So we got 120 to 105. And what's funny is, if you use this 73 model over here, I got this little score that I can just kind of look at to get an idea in my head. So it finished at 120, 105. We projected it at 119, 104. So that was pretty close, but I'm not really worried about hitting the score on the number. I'm just worried about, do we cover that spread? And we did. As far as total, it was 228.5. It ended at 225. We projected it at 223.6. And then our middle ground was 223. So we had it going under. 65% under. It ended up going under. I did not bet the under. There wasn't strong enough of a play for me, but something to look at. Chicago, this is another game. So the first thing that came across the board, these teams just played, and when we were in our chat group, Trae Young was questionable, and I said, I love a play on Chicago. And then Trae Young he cleared protocols, went in the game, and I said, okay, now I love the over. And it ended up almost exactly the same score as it was the first time around. So we had Chicago -8.5 and over 227. And how I come up with that is, average line, we got Chicago by 11. And then down here, we got Chicago by 15. So you could safely say, we think Chicago's going to win by 11 to 15 points. And they're laying 8.5. Well, they end up winning 131 to 117. So they end up covering the spread, winning in that margin. As far as total, you see this 227. Now, if you look down here, you see 223, 227, middle ground here, 225. One thing you have to understand is when Trae Young is on the court, their offensive efficiency skyrockets, but so does their defensive efficiency. They also allow a lot more points. So that's one of the kind of common sense things that you can't get from the cheat sheet. That you got to kind of know. And then always look at the ATS over here, which they just played, and they put up, I think it was 248 total points, and it was pretty much the same team, both sides going back out there again. So I threw this out the window and said, hey, I'm going over on this game, and it went over again. Easy over last night, and Chicago covered. Yeah, so last night they ended up at 248 again. I think the prior win was 130 to 118, and last night they were 131 to 117. So it was great across the board for props and all of that good stuff. Now, one of the reasons this does come out a little low is Trae Young missed a couple of games, and this is 70% weighted to the last 3 games, so that's going to pull the Atlanta offensive efficiency down a little bit. So that's something to keep in mind, and also that lowers their pace, their possessions per game. So I write up plays when I can, when I'm not busy at work, but all the data here on the sheets, you just got to kind of know how to look at it and interpret it, and that will help you with your plays. Another thing is that I want to talk about our power rankings. So Vegas, they have their own power rankings, and basically how they're calculating their spread is the difference of the power rankings plus the home field advantage. Well, if you see a team that's really bad ATS, like 13 and 20, for Atlanta, then that usually means their power ranking is off because it's not hitting where they want it to be. And then on the other side, we have Chicago over here that's 20 and 11 ATS, so a great against the spread record. And at home, they're 10 and 5. So I factor this stuff in too. I look at the ATS records overall, home, road. So here you could say Atlanta's 13 and 20 and 6 and 10 on the road. Chicago's 20 and 11 and 10 and 5 at home. So that's going to point you to Chicago, and then just kind of knowing the recent games and who's in, who's out. But we hit both of those. I didn't make a play here. The Clippers are just hard for me to follow, and it's usually a late night game, and if I'm working the next day, I don't have time to stay up and sweat it. So looking at this game, so Boston minus 6.5. We have an average line of Boston minus 1. Our last 3 weighted model, we have Boston minus 1. So this would push you to take in the 6.5 points with the Clippers. And they ended up winning the game outright, 91 to 82. As far as a total, I didn't touch it. The Clippers have so many moving parts right now, but it was 211. I typically don't play totals that low, but you can see everything here was over. This was over. We had 86% over, and we did not get it. And this had 213, and ended up at 173, so it went way under. We missed that one. But if you look here at the ATS record, you can see they're constantly hitting the over. So this over-under record here, so the Clippers they hit the over 14 times and the under 20 times. So they're 14 and 20 for the over, so not good. They're a good underplay. And same thing for Boston. They're a 14 and 19 overplay, so that means they're a 19 and 4 play for the under. So both teams are heavy ATS unders, even home and road, especially Clippers on the road. They must slow down quite a bit. I did live bet this game. What was crazy is I wasn't even looking at the total, but midway through the third quarter, they were on pace for about 175, and they had 186.5 as the live line. So, I threw a unit on the under, and it ended up at 173. And I did another under. I think it was the Hornets game. It ended at 224 over here. And my book had 236.5 midway through the third quarter, and the third quarter was half over, and they'd barely scored, so I went under that one as well. But anyways, we would have took Clippers plus 6.5 is kind of where it would have routed you, and you can see all 5 of these were Clippers. We got that, but we did miss the over. And the over, looking at the ATS and kind of knowing who's on the court, that's something you can decide to fade or follow. But at 211, and we're middling it at 213, and we're at 213 here, that's not enough for me to bet an over. That's pretty close to the line. New York Knicks, Knicks were minus 8. We got an average line of minus 12. And then down here, we have a big line of minus 18. So 12 to 18 is what we would have been putting the spread at. and they ended up winning by 11, but they were down in the mid-third quarter. So I got a live bet at Knicks plus 6.5, and they actually ended up coming back and winning the game. So I was excited to see that. So you would see the minus 12, minus 18. They're laying minus 8, so that would point you to a Knicks play. That's one we wrote up. We basically wrote it up because Detroit was so bad. In our custom power rankings, they ranked 30th. In the last 10 power rankings that we grabbed, they were also 30th. 1-9 last 10, and they're 5-27 straight up, 3-12 at home, 15-7 ATS. And then the Knicks, they're coming off 2 wins, not great ATS, but again, if you look here at their rankings for the season and for the last 3, everything's bottom 5. So that's a great team to live bet. If they get a lead, go after them. But we end up hitting that one. That was one of our plays. And I don't think, we didn't do a play in any of these last 2 games. So Phoenix, OKC, Phoenix minus 14.5. We've got a minus 8. And then down here has 8. So this would lean you to OKC plus 14.5. And OKC's been really good ATS, 21-12, 10-6 on the road. But again, I typically don't bet against Phoenix. The Clippers and the Suns are 2 teams I really don't bet against because you never know which team you're going to get. And that game ended up, I didn't even see the final. So it was 115-97. So really close to the spread. They ended up winning by 18, and the spread was 14.5, the last one I grabbed. So Phoenix would have covered this. I didn't watch the game or see how it played out, but if you were looking at it, that's kind of one of the things that would have led you to it. As far as the total, I'd look at 219. I'd say, okay, right here on middle is 213. And then we've got kind of a wide range here of 204 to 223. So the majority of the outcomes are going to be under. So about 75% of our range is on the under. And that ended up, it was under. 212, 213, under 219. So that did go under. And then down here we had 219, 221. So that was kind of right at it, just a hair over. So I'm looking for games that have a significant difference, unless you got some type of edge somewhere where someone's out and then you know what their on-off court numbers are. And if you don't know how to find that, I've got a quick tutorial right here on the sheet on how to find a player's on-off court numbers to see what a team does. And this is for significant people that are ruled out for COVID protocols or injuries. Looking at the last game, we got Charlotte and Indy. So Indy minus 3.5 at home. Both teams about 500 over the last 10 games. Our average line here, we have Charlotte minus 5, and then our 70-30 model, we have Charlotte minus 10. So I would look at this and say, okay, we have Charlotte winning by 5 to 10 points. There were no key injuries of people that were going to be out. Looking at the ATS numbers here, Indy is 16-17 ATS, so they're about 50-50. And then Charlotte is 21-14. They are really good. Now here, they're really good at home. They're 11-2 ATS, but on the road, they're only 10-12. So kind of factor that in. Take it with a grain of salt. But I know they've got everybody back in there, so that was one of the games I did like, but I did not want to do a play on it. So we have them winning by 5 to 10, and they were getting plus 3.5. So I really like that. And Indy is one of these teams. Look at their straight-up home road record. So at home, they're 11-7 straight up. On the road, they're 3-13. So this is something you really factor in. So if Indy's on the road, I know there's a good shot they're going to get pummeled, but they play really well at home. So that's one of the reasons I kind of stayed off of this game. Yesterday, I already had 6 games that I liked between sides and totals, so I didn't want to overdo it and put some more in. But on this one, we had them winning by 5 to 10. They were getting plus 3.5, and then they ended up winning by 8. So they won 116-108. They ended up winning as a dog, so that was good. That would have been a good play if you looked at it. As far as the total, let's see, 227 does seem kind of high, so all of these are leaning under. ATS numbers, so Charlotte's a big overplay, 20-14, and then kind of about 50-50. But at home, this is interesting. So at home, Indy is 11-7 for the over, but on the road, they're 11-5 for the under. So that's interesting. So that would have led you to an over. That's kind of 50-50. And what did it end up at? 116, 108. so that's 224. Numbers 227, so it slid under. We had all 5 models under, so it was pretty close. Our middle ground here, 223 and line 227. That's close enough. I'm probably going to stay away from it unless I've got something in the back of my head that, I see one of these ATS trends that I really like. But our middle ground here, 223, would point you to an under. Combined points per game is under over the last 3. Allowed is also under. So what they're scoring and what they're allowing is 219 to 220. So that's a pretty good indication. It's probably going to fall somewhere in that range, and it did at 224. And then over here with our roto pace model, we got 223.7, and it fell at 224. So it fell kind of right in there. If you're looking at the total range, so basically this new total range that I added in here is I took the lowest possible paces and subtracted 1.5, and then I took the high and added 1.5 to give us a little bit more of a gap depending on if shots are falling or not. So 210 to 233, 71% of the outcomes come to the under. So slid under, but again, it's not something that I did bet, and I think that was our last game. So that's kind of how we look at the cheat sheet. It has changed a little bit, but I wanted to post another video just to kind of show you what I'm looking at. A good place to look at people that are in and out. Let me go ahead and show you that real quick. So I go to Basketball Monster, and let me go ahead and close this out. So go to Basketball Monster, and then when you get it up here, click Fantasy Basketball News. And then you can look down here and it will show you all of the recent changes for the games. So like here for today, Milwaukee and Orlando, you can scroll down here and see who's out, see if there's any big names. Philly, Brooklyn's one that I was watching. Kevin Durant's coming back. He's off injury, so he should play tonight. Drummond should be back. Aldridge should be back. Of course, Kyrie's still out. So Brooklyn's getting a lot of people back. So they'll have Harden, Aldridge, and Durant. So I like that. Coming down here, you can see Jared Allen's doubtful. Garland's already out tonight. CD's out. So it kind of gives you a good idea of who's in, who's out. And again, watch the video if you want to see the how to find the players' on-off court numbers. But again, this is just a quick look at last night. And good luck. I'm going to get some sheets up.